What's up, champs? Welcome to another episode of the Keeping Karlsson Short Shifts Fantasy Hockey Podcast. I'm never going to pronounce that combination of words in the same order. I'm your host, of course, Ben Burnett, and joining me, as always, Louis Ezekiel. Louis, my friend, how are you doing on this fine evening tonight?
I am great, and I love the way you vary your emphasis. I think it keeps things spicy and interesting. Hey, I had a question for you, by the way.
Okay.
I know you had a kind of a frustrating outing last night in your fantasy game. You know, really struggled to contain Clayton Keller, not getting a lot of production from anyone not named Kirill Kaprizov. When you're getting frustrated, do you think it's a good idea to go into the Discord chat and kind of let everyone know how frustrated you are? I'm just curious your thoughts on this.
Yes, I am a big fan.
No need to get so pissy with me, Ben.
Oh, you're doing pissy. You're calling me Leon Draisaitl, are you?
Well, yeah, you're the second greatest fantasy hockey podcast on the air right now.
Okay, so yeah, tell the folks about Leon's interview today.
Yeah, so if you were not very online today, we had a lovely interview where Leon basically just wanted to brush off some questions. Was it Jim Matheson?
It was.
Yeah, he was kind of. It seemed like he was trying to lead, a fine question, like about what Leon thinks the biggest struggle for the Oilers are. But it's also, he's obviously going to give the non-answer. He's not going to say, oh, it's our goaltending. It really sucks. And Matheson didn't really like, obviously, not being able to get a nice quotable response from him, and kind of went off on him and asked him why he was being pissy. And we all sort of got to enjoy Draisaitl giving a little smirk like, I don't give a shit what you think. Get out of here with this nonsense. I've had it. So, kind of an interesting little interaction there.
Is that our first curse word since like 2020? Since I dropped
my gosh, we let one slip through. Sorry, Brian.
All right. Louis, let's get into the show. We have a lot to talk about tonight, and we are going to start, as we always do, with COVID-19. I think famously our favorite topic to discuss. Tonight, not so much wanting to discuss updates to the COVID lists around the league. Instead, I want to talk about the NHL updating its COVID protocol following the All-Star game. The league will no longer test asymptomatic, fully vaccinated players. Obviously, I don't really want to get into the merits of this plan. I think we've all argued about COVID-19 enough outside of the fantasy hockey realm. Ideally, though, this, in terms of fantasy purposes, this should result in fewer COVID postponements, hopefully fewer players hitting the COVID-19 list. Hopefully, it also doesn't lead to significant outbreaks, but I guess just like the government, the NHL is ready to throw its hands up and give up the battle to try and keep COVID out of locker rooms. Elliot Friedman says the NHL is expecting to release a major schedule update tomorrow. It'll be interesting to see if this includes the many games that need to be rescheduled, if we're just going to get a lump sum of new games hitting the schedule, and whether or not that could change the Olympic break. Apparently, it doesn't matter to Yahoo either way. Yahoo added a disclaimer last week announcing that Week 16 will remain a 4-week matchup with no changes to the ad limits, which I hate, obviously, and I guess is just it's worth being forewarned about. Louis, do you have any takes on the many COVID-19 updates going on in the NHL right now?
Sure. So I think the number one thing is, I think you're totally right that the big thing we want to make sure we don't see is major outbreaks, especially if it results in players, having symptomatic experience with COVID. I understand where they're coming from in terms of feeling like, we're our elite athletes. We're very healthy. We do not have many, if any at all, comorbidities. So I understand their frustration with seeing so many games postponed. And also it has certainly seemed a little haphazard in terms of how many players need to be out and that sort of thing. So, I think this is a good thing for the league in terms of keeping games going and not having a bunch of postponements. And I am cautiously optimistic that, these players aren't going to have any, long-term negative ramifications from getting sick. But I don't love the message that it sends necessarily. It definitely, this is a league that is trying to, not experience the catastrophic loss of money that they had last season. And, we'll leave it at that. As far as Yahoo goes, that is going to make for a very interesting period. I worry a little bit that, people fall behind and suddenly there's like a month of fantasy hockey where 3 of the weeks you're just kind of playing catch up. You don't have any moves to make. So I'm hoping that Yahoo will do something with that. There certainly has been a lot of, I'm sure, an outpouring of people requesting changes. But as of right now, it seems like it's kind of set in stone. Yahoo sort of seems like they get the season underway and it's like a boulder rolling down a mountain. There's nothing that really can stop or change it. But we'll have to wait and see. Obviously, if there are significant updates with Yahoo, we will let you know, as that is probably, it's certainly among the most popular platforms. We'll just see where things go from there. But yeah, I think the fantasy world agrees. We would love to avoid a 4-week matchup with only one move on average per week, I think, or I guess it depends on your league settings. In the cupful, that would result in 4 moves over 4 weeks. I think that would be tough to deal with, especially in the age of COVID.
Yes, I think it's clear now, as much as it's always been, that Yahoo does not care about fantasy hockey. Lewis, let's hop into the player news, and I think we both are excited to talk about Pittsburgh, where the Penguins are finally healthy for the first time all season, and they finally rolled out last year's top power play. Malkin, Crosby, Brian Rust, Jake Gensel, Chris Letang, bumping Evan Rodriguez down to line 3, power play 2, on a third line with Jeff Carter and Dominic Simone. Carter's been up and down the lineup this year, and a little bit more so than Rodriguez. And now he's getting that same deployment, except for he put up 2 assists and 6 shots in Tuesday night's game from that spot, whereas Evan Rodriguez had his lowest time on ice in more than 2 months, and did not put up any peripherals to write home about. Jeff Carter still on pace for 56 points this season and shooting about 3 shots a game. Really impressive season from the 37-year-old so far. Rodriguez has obviously been a revelation in Pittsburgh. 2 weeks ago, he was pacing for 75 points, and we were already 33 games into the season. He's been cold, though, the past 2 weeks. No points in his last 5. Down to earth a little bit with a 65-point pace on the season now, which definitely seems a lot more reasonable to me. The latest lines seem like a blow to his outlook. Rodriguez is still rostered in 71% of Yahoo leagues. Carter is just under 40%, while Kasperi Kapanen and Jason Zucker, who each put up a pair of points last night from line 2 with Evgeny Malkin, are available in more than 80% of Yahoo leagues each. Lewis, I'm wondering if it's worth holding on to Rodriguez or Carter, and if not, are you swapping them out for KK or Zucker?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question because this is a significant change. And I think if people move quickly, they can really improve their situation. I really want to have the folks lining up with Malkin. I think that makes that second line dangerous in a way that it wasn't nearly as much earlier on in the season. He really seems to have come back as a real force and clearly seems to be quite healthy. I'll start with Rodriguez. This is sort of a situation that reminds me of what we just saw happen with Jeremy Swayman. Rodriguez came in and, found himself in a spot where he was filling in. He did about as good as he possibly could have been expected to do in that role, just like Swayman did. But the situation changed. Rask came in Boston, and we'll probably mention him a little bit later. And, Swayman was then sent down, and he's hopeful that he can get back up if he, proves to be the best option to help Boston win games. Same thing with Rodriguez. As great as he was playing probably a little bit over his head. And certainly now that his deployment has changed, I really think it changes his outlook. Anyone who picked him up obviously benefited immensely from the extremely cheap price that they paid. But it seems like that prime run is going to be over moving forward. So yes, I would be definitely ready to move on from Rodriguez. I think I'm ready to move on from Carter too. He did get those 2 points. One of his assists was on an empty net goal from Crosby at the end of the game. That's not his typical line mate. So I actually am into the idea of swapping them for Kapanen or Zucker. I grabbed Kapanen in the cupful, and I'm pretty pleased to have him, although I foolishly sat him last night to bring Rust back in, and Kapanen had a goal and an assist. Rust didn't really produce anything, but he was so scorching it was hard to leave him on the bench, and it was my only option by 10 o'clock. Looking at this group, I know Zucker had the 2 goals last game, but he's been out for a little bit, so I wonder if it might, I mean, he hit the ground running clearly, but, I'm not as confident maybe in his conditioning. I think I would say, my list would be Kapanen at the top. He's really showed some good chemistry, with Malkin, Zucker second, Carter third, and Rodriguez fourth in the pecking order. And I would definitely be swapping out Rodriguez or Carter for Kapanen or Zucker while those fellas are available, because I think those roster numbers are going to start to change pretty significantly. I think they're going to start to exchange basically.
So I definitely, we talked about the Pens top power play a few weeks ago, and I was on board with Rodriguez is going down as soon as Evgeny Malkin comes back. And that has been the case. I'm not ready to drop Rodriguez in all leagues, though. He's just been so good. And honestly, if it's not that I think that he can be a force from the third line necessarily, but I think he can be good at least and worth holding on to in 14-team leagues. He's shooting a lot. The second power play seems to be decent. And honestly, if Pittsburgh struggles or slows down at all, could we see a Brian Rust move down to line 2 and they start to mix things up? Like, I wouldn't be surprised at all to see the top line get shaken up again down the road. So Personally, I would be holding on to Rodriguez for a few games just to see how things shake out once the sort of adrenaline of getting everyone back in the lineup wears off. Jason Zucker's just been so mid for so long that to me, he's the clear number 4 of the group. I think Carter and Kapanen are kind of interchangeable. I'd probably go Kapanen. And then I think I would hold on to Rodriguez, and maybe I'm too slow acting and that's going to bite me. But for me, I prefer Rodriguez. Lewis, let's jump over to Los Angeles next, where we can finally talk about a player who I know is near and dear to your heart.
Oh, sure. Yes. So, we've talked before about how I had Petersen to start the season and swapped him over for Jonathan Quick, but I think the time has come to swap back to the other side. We've talked about obviously the great start that Quick has. I don't need to restate all of that stuff. Really Quick has struggled lately. He started just 3 of the last 6 games, after he had a stretch where he started 9 out of 10. So obviously, things were already starting to slide in that direction. And he's had 2 really bad starts in those 3 starts, an 842 and then a grisly 647 save percentage on Monday against the Sharks, leaving a lot of folks who started him, like myself, feeling pretty pessimistic about their chances this week. He did have a quality start against Pittsburgh in there, which I thought was a pretty impressive go. But he's had 3 or more goals against. Quick has in 5 of his last 7 starts. He's looked really poor in contrast to the heater Petersen has been on, where he's had 3 straight quality starts with 1 or 0 goals against. Now he has a tougher matchup Thursday against Tampa Bay, which will start after we have recorded this show. So obviously we'll know how he managed to hold up. But I think even, a sub-average but not catastrophic start should be enough to secure the bulk of the starts moving forward. Obviously, this can all change, but I think, it's just like we saw earlier in the season. We've seen Petersen, really start to take charge and string together a series of nice, games in a row. This is an LA team that I think people are starting to, if they weren't already coming around on them, they should be by now. This is a pretty decent team. And they're not even fully healthy right now. I've got Adrian Kempe off of that top line with COVID-19. And I think, Iafalo's off too. Like there's just a lot of plugs right now. So, I think this is a team that can be really good, and that, Petersen or whoever the goalie is, if they are playing, even half decent, is worth holding on to. But I think it's going to be Petersen getting the bulk of the moves moving forward. If you are looking for permission to drop Quick, I think you have it. I went ahead and did it, to get Petersen playing. So, I think he is the guy right now. He's proven that, he has the hot hand, and I think that's who the coaching staff is going to want to stick with.
Iafalo is back in the lineup. I think it's just Kempe that's missing in that top 6. Interestingly, you didn't mention the man who destroyed Jonathan Quick's fantasy relevance, which is Timo Meier, 5 goals on 6 shots. At one point, I think Jonathan Quick was 6 for 12 on the evening, which is like a hot night in the NBA, or like a hot half in the NBA. But at this point, I feel like Timo Meier is to Jonathan Quick's fantasy managers as Marc-Andre Fleury's stick save is to Mike Babcock's coaching career. Lewis, nice. We're going to hop quickly over to Denver, where Darcy Kemper is currently day-to-day. He was pulled last night in the game against Minnesota after Jordan Greenway appeared to take a bit of a cheap shot at him. Concussion spotters pulled him from the game. Kemper did not leave voluntarily. Pavel Francouz comes in relief, earns the win, and is now potentially in line for the starter's workload if Kemper misses significant time. Frankie really hasn't settled in since coming back from injuries that have kept him sidelined since before the COVID shutdown, but he did look good in relief Monday. I think this is, more than anything, you're just keeping your eye on Twitter, seeing if there's an announcement, and if he is starting, probably worth streaming in if you need goaltending help.
Yeah, unlike the Oilers, which, we could count on at the start of the year to at least get you a win, if nothing else. Colorado is really firing on at least most cylinders here. They've been pretty quality. So, I think that you definitely want their goalie if you're trying to get wins. And he should be decent for rates. Again, we haven't really seen him settle in and maybe achieve at his ceiling, but, he's been decent enough that on a high powered team like Colorado that can score 5 or 6 on any given night, you should be in pretty good shape for a W.
Lewis, we need to take a very quick break. When we come back, we have a couple of streaks to talk about. You're listening to Short Shifts. Welcome back to Short Shifts. Lewis, I'm going to send the ball over your way. I want you to start us off in the shift segment of our show.
All right. Well, both players that I want to talk about have just really been struggling shooting the puck lately. And I want to start in Seattle with Jordan Eberle, who's actually doing all right for points overall. He does have 7 points in the last 11 games. But only 2 assists in the last 6, and has been really struggling with his shooting. Only 1 goal in the last 14 games, with 29 shots since his last goal. Now, obviously, that's not going to hold. Some of these are going to find their way in. But, Seattle just has been pretty unimpressive offensively lately, and I worry that, they're starting to take some of these kind of shots for the sake of taking shots just to sort of get things going offensively. Eberle GMs, I'm sure we're hoping for a little more after the line 1 power play 1 forward started hot, including an early November hat trick, but just really hasn't been seeing it for the last month or so. Jared McCann has been solid lately, so hopefully Eberle can start converting a bit more, or at least get on a few more assists and kind of keep that point total going. But this is someone that I've got my eye on. I'm still holding him for the time being, because I do think, again, 29 shots since his last goal. If 1 or 2 of these had gotten through, we maybe wouldn't be talking about him. But it is a little worrying just because Seattle has not been very interesting offensively. And, I think we hope for a little more from him, especially after his pretty hot start to the year.
Yeah, it's an interesting player to sort of talk about as a streak because, like you said, it's not really the box score numbers that are concerning me. It's more so just like Seattle's downturn as a team, just looking lackadaisical, looking like a team that you do not really want any fantasy assets from. I was super keen not to repeat my mistakes and wanted to grab Jared McCann, wanted to grab Jordan Eberle in a couple of leagues, and they were really cheap. So it's not like I went out and paid this premium, but overall I was kind of thinking like, man, it took me too long to adjust when Vegas was good. I don't want to be making the mistake and missing out on the guys who are driving the bus in Seattle, because obviously, top line, top power play anywhere in the NHL has some opportunity, has some potential. I'm really not loving what I'm seeing in Seattle lately, and I still think Eberle and McCann, those 2 in particular, should be fine, even if they go on slumps, and maybe you do stream them out, maybe you do stream them in. I don't see them as being must-holds across shallow leagues, or I think they're waiver wire plus guys in a lot of spots, and that's okay, but they're just not must-holds, and they're probably not league winners like we had hoped.
All right. I don't know if we're ready to truly call this a hot streak, but I think anything compared to being in the total deep freeze for this player counts, and I'm excited to hear what you have to say about him. How about we head over to Montreal and talk about point streak Jeff Petry?
Yeah, let's hop out of the deep freeze and into the Petri dish and talk about Jeff, who has 2 points in his last 2 games, including the first goal of the season and the first power play point of his season in the 3 games since returning to the lineup. With those 2 points, he has now doubled his season total up to 4 points in 30 games. Petry also led Montreal D-men in power play time on ice, which I think is a bit of a red herring more than anything else. Montreal has been, as they've long done, splitting their top power play unit deployment, but I think at this point it's very clear that one unit is better than the other, and it's the unit that Jeff Petry is not on. Typically, when you're picking a guy who you want to be on Montreal, you want to get somebody on the top power play. You want to get the guy who's playing with Nick Suzuki, Mike Hoffman, Tyler Toffoli, who I only discovered as I was prepping this segment, who is back tonight. 2-3 weeks ahead of schedule. So Tyler Toffoli back in the lineup. I would be reaching into the waiver wire in deeper leagues, 14-team leagues. You should be looking to see if Tyler Toffoli is available. And basically, the issue with Jeff Petry is that he's playing with the power play 2 scrubs. Basically, Montreal cycled Chris Weidman and Ben Sherratt with the top group, and that's why one of them didn't eclipse Petry in power play time on ice. But Petry is not getting top power play deployment, and at this point, I really don't see what is going to happen to give him that. It is not the points, therefore, that make me raise an eyebrow toward Petry's recent play. I'm more interested in the fact that he's actually had decent peripherals in the last 2 games. 4 shots, 8 hits, 3 blocks. Not useless, which is what Petry was before the injury. So he's starting to get added in deep leagues. I'm not sure people should be jumping onto that bandwagon unless it's because of unless you're in a bangers league and he offers a bit of a peripheral floor that you're not adding him and then getting a bunch of zeros because he goes cold again. And you know, the upside is there if they do decide to give him a bit more of an offensive rope, then hey, you've already got him on your lineup because he's getting you peripherals, and all of a sudden you have, you know, at least you would hope a decent like number 4 defenseman, number 3 maybe in a bangers league. You could see that as his new ceiling. So that's what's up with Jeff Petry, and yeah, I'm not excited about Jeff Petry. I will not let him hurt me again, Lewis.
Yeah, still not certainly what owners were looking for when they drafted him after his great year last year, but you like to see that he at least is providing something, and he might be the kind of guy that, you know, has been dropped enough that he could be reasonably widely available and give you some useful production in a way that he really hasn't so far this year. And, you know, if you were not the person who drafted him, then you are excited to have a free shot at getting something positive in your lineup from him when he, you know, really was doing nothing for the folks who picked him up to start the season. Let's jump over to St. Louis and talk about one more cold player, and I might sneak in an extra one at the end here. But I want to talk about David Perron. Folks who grabbed Perron were looking brilliant at the start of the year. He busted out of the gate, scoring 6 goals with 2 assists in his first 5 games. He's really managed to keep the assists going. That's mostly what has buoyed his point totals. But he just has been ice cold shooting the puck, managing just 2 goals in the last 21 games. Just like I was talking about with Everly, the shooting is not sustainable. Those 2 goals are coming on 42 shots. So, you know, there's certainly going to be some regression coming in terms of that shooting percentage, but it also means that he's averaging only 2 shots a game over those 21 games compared to the 4 shots a game during the early hot run over 5 games. So, we probably didn't expect him to keep shooting 4 a game after that early hot run, but it really has come down quite a bit. Now, he's got no points in the last 4. He's down on line 3 with Brandon Saad and Logan Brown. We do have Pavel Buchnevich coming back, and Ben, you and I have kind of talked about this a fair amount, that we feel like getting anyone in the Blues top 9 right now, the way they are rolling, has been a really positive thing for your lineup. even with this cold streak, given, the shooting rate and the inability to convert, is David Perron someone you're still interested in if he is a line 3 guy? And do you think that line 3 deployment is going to last?
I'm not really. I think the Blues, to me, are basically like worrying about the Blues deployment is like worrying about Carolina's deployment. Or, it's just like if your guy is on line 2 one game, he's probably going to be on line 1 the next, and then line 3 the next. And in St. Louis in particular, no matter where players are up and down the lineup, they're just performing. So Perron going cold is not great, but overall, I'm staking myself to him because of his recent history. And he looked so good last year as an 85-point player. He came out the gate so strong this year, returning from a couple of injuries and a COVID-19 diagnosis. So I have rope for David Perron. I'm not going to cut him out of my roster this quickly. 4 games is nothing in deep leagues. In shallow leagues, yeah, I don't have a problem sort of streaming him out if you're able to find somebody who's going to put up 65 points or whatever. If he is a 65-point guy, that's not bad in most leagues either. It just is not quite the ceiling that we were expecting. I'm very interested to see how things turn out when the Blues do get healthy again soon. They have a very crowded forward group, so I'm curious to see sort of what happens, and especially they're crowded on the wings there. So, St. Louis has been amazing to roster players on, but definitely some level of concern for David Perron. Not as high on him as I was at the beginning of the year. That is for certain.
Yeah, and just some other folks that maybe bear mentioning here. We did see Shen has recently made his return to the lineup. He put up a 4-point night and played 19 minutes on the top line. Across on the other side of him was Ivan Barbashev, who also put together a 4-point night. Me and my opponent have them against each other, so it was a very like 2 Spider-Men pointing at each other kind of situation. Ryan O'Reilly had a great night on that top line. The options abound, certainly, in St. Louis. And, I think Perron is going to hit a few of those shots and he might become an appealing option there later on. I would not be in a big hurry to drop him, as you said. One quick correction. I did earlier say that Kapanen had a goal and assist. It looks like 2 assists. And I did want to very briefly mention one kind of mini cold streak. It's only a game, but after a really nice initial game for Tuukka Rask, he had a really rough outing, allowing 5 goals to Carolina in the first period. The Bruins did look pretty lackadaisical. I don't think that all falls on Tuukka, but it is certainly a rough data point for us after a very nice 2-goal against outing to start. To see him give up 5 in the first and get replaced. So, Tuukka owners, hang in there. The team's not going to give up on him that quickly. I think he's got a fair amount of leash, but definitely a tough outing in a week where some of these early goalie starts have just been really catastrophic.
Took a hard L tonight, I'd say.
Absolutely.
All right, Lewis, that's all the time that we have for tonight. Thank you all for sticking with us through this long shift. Lewis, thank you for hanging out with me tonight, and I look forward to getting back in the saddle on Thursday.
Yes, a total pleasure. Really enjoyed it. Thank you, everyone who came along and joined us. We want to remind everyone to follow us on Twitter at ShortShiftsKK. You can find Brian and Elon at Keeping Carlson. Dave from the Stream Scheme, who is off to another great start to his Stream Scheme week, is at NHL Stream Scheme. We've got the whole suite of game day lines accounts that are really excellent. They're kind of all that you need to get your news and your goalie starts. So check those out as well. And until we see you next time, play smart and keep your shifts short.